I've put together this little presentation for a course which I've taught a couple of times at different universities. The theme of the course was Indian culture through biography. The idea was for people who have absolutely no idea, or very little idea about India. I wanted to introduce India through the lives of so many persons. I started with the life of Buddha, and from there I went to the life of Krishna, and eventually to the life of Lord Chaitanya, and some others, and eventually I came to the life of Srila Prabhupada. And prior to presentation on Srila Prabhupada, I spoke on the life of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, better known as Mahatma Gandhi. And so in this presentation about Srila Prabhupada, I'm also doing a bit of comparison. And as devotees, we may not feel very comfortable with such a comparison. Because why? We feel like, how can you compare Srila Prabhupada to anyone? No matter how great and famous they might be. At the same time, I think it's worth giving some attention to, if for no other reason than that Srila Prabhupada saw himself as a follower of Gandhi for some time. He was quite a serious follower until he met his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur. Well, so this is also something of a work in progress as far as the visuals go, and I've also made some notes in English. And what I'm doing here is just giving a sort of overview of some of the basic points about Prabhupada for people who have no idea who he is. He was born as Abhay Charan De in Calcutta in the year 1896. And in terms of his social standing, he was born into what might be called a middle-class family that was associated with a certain Vaishya community, the Suvarnamanic gold dealers. Although Srila Prabhupada's father was a cloth merchant. I'd like to say that the biography of Srila Prabhupada, written by Satsarupdas Goswami, originally came out in 6 volumes, English version, and each volume had a different title. And the title of the first volume was A Lifetime in Preparation. And I've always liked the title, and I've also liked the content, the subject of that first volume, telling about Srila Prabhupada, his life prior to his coming to the West. And I think the title of the book was very appropriate, A Lifetime in Preparation. As we know, Srila Prabhupada what was the age of Srila Prabhupada when he arrived in New York? Yeah? Huh? Everyone agrees 69.
Almost 70.
Almost 70, that's true. If it's 69, it's almost 70. Yeah, so usually people don't go venturing off to the other side of the globe alone with no money at such an age. But as we know, Srila Prabhupada was no ordinary person. He went to this college called Scottish Churches College, and as the name suggests, this was founded by some missionaries, Christian missionaries from Scotland, and it has become a quite highly respected college to the present day in Calcutta. If you go on the website, if you look on Wikipedia, you'll see they give a list of several, maybe not for us, but well-known, prominent people who have been graduates of Scottish Churches College. I visited there a couple of times, many years ago, when no classes were going on. And it was interesting to imagine Srila Prabhupada there as a young man in his early 20s, hearing from his professor Urquhart, expressing his doubt about the reality of karma. And at the time, Prabhupada explains to us years later, he said, at that time I did not know how to refute him. I felt he is wrong, but I didn't know how to refute him. He had not yet met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur. Well, in 1920, Prabhupada graduated from the college. He had studied philosophy and English, and at least these two, English and philosophy. And but he rejected his diploma. Now imagine going to university, you go for 3 years or 4 years, and you work very hard and you pass all the exams. Why? Because you're hoping that you're going to get this piece of paper at the end of it all that says, yes, I did it. Srila Prabhupada rejected his diploma. It was a political statement. It was It's funny how technology just enters into our lives and takes over. Yeah, Prabhupada was protesting. It was a token. It was a gesture of protest, a symbolic protest against the British presence in India, because by this time, by 1920, the Indian independence movement had come into quite some strong momentum, especially with Gandhi. And of course that's a long story, but at that time Prabhupada was, like many young students, university students, being very politically conscious, and wanting to do something to change the world. So Prabhupada continued following Gandhi, and another symbolic gesture he made was that he would wear what's called khadi cloth. Khadi means it's cotton cloth, which is a dhoti is made by hand loom. as opposed to machine-made, because this was a major sort of idea of Gandhi is India needs to become independent economically, not just politically, and that means we have to produce our own goods. And how to produce our own goods? Well, let's start with making our own cloth. So you see this image, you saw this image, you didn't see it, it's coming. Here's an image of Gandhi on the top, a famous photo of him. I believe this was taken when he was in prison at one time. And he has this spinning wheel. So the idea was he was trying to get people in India by the millions. Everyone should be spinning cloth as a patriotic effort. So Prabhupada was not doing that, but he was wearing the cloth that was handmade, and that was a political statement. Here's an image of Scottish Churches College. But then in 1922, Srila Prabhupada met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur, initially against his will, you could say. It was a friend of Prabhupada's, at that time Abhay Charan, who had before this time, briefly before, had met Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur and was very impressed. And he thought, oh, Abhay Charan Babu, you should also come. You really should meet this Swami. He's really nice. He's really impressive. And Prabhupada at that time was very skeptical. Why was he skeptical? Because he had seen so many sadhus who he felt were not really sadhus. People whom his father had invited for dinner at their home. His father, Gaur Mohande, thank you, was a very pious Vaishnava, and he felt this was his duty. So he would invite these people. Prabhupada, as a young man, as a young boy, he would see them and he would think, nah, this is not a real sadhu. So then when his friend said, you have to come meet this sadhu, he said, no thanks, I've met so many. No, really, you should meet him. He's very special. Well, he finally persuaded him, fortunately. And the place which they met, I need to insert another image, which I didn't get to here, but the building on the roof of which, flat roofs in India typically, on the roof of which they met, that building is now owned by ISKCON. It's in central North Calcutta, and the idea is at some point to renovate the building and make it a nice center. How do we know about Srila Prabhupada's life? One could ask. Well, we know from his own comments. Prabhupada spoke with his disciples on different occasions, many conversations where he would share his memories. And much of that went into what has been called the official biography of Prabhupada, as I said, 6 volumes, which was also compiled from many, many interviews, file cabinets full of interviews when they were transcribed. Also, of course, we have Prabhupada's books, and we have his letters, some 6,000 letters. Yes, I think, was it 6,000 letters? A lot of letters. in any case. And then his lectures and his conversations. We have a record of Prabhupada's, which is really very extensive. 37 volumes of his recorded conversations. And we have a growing number. The number has not stopped yet. We have a growing number of memoirs. Memoir means someone is sharing their memories. So we had, for example, 5 volumes of Harisori Prabhu, his diaries. I think he's also in here. Different sort of geographical memoirs. There's a book that was done by Bhakti Gauravani Goswami about Srila Prabhupada in Germany. There's one about South Africa. There's actually several such books. And I mentioned yesterday we have we have Shyamasundar Prabhu's book, the first volume, Chasing Rhino with the Swami. And such literature as this. We also have Tamal Krishna Goswami's diary, in which he kept diary of the last days of Srila Prabhupada. Okay. Just some impressions, images. On the top you see Gandhi sitting with Jawaharlal Nehru, who became the first Prime Minister of India. It's ironic in some ways that Nehru became the Prime Minister, in that the vision that Gandhi had for India and the vision that Nehru had for India, you could say, were 180 degrees opposite from each other. Gandhi had an idea of a return to village culture, self-sufficiency, all these kind of ideas were there. We could say something like simple living and high thinking. In fact, that phrase, I'm not sure whether it came from Gandhi or from another source. Prabhupada, of course, quoted it many times. Well, the fate of India seems to have been sealed, so to say, by these two figures, but it's certainly not the whole story, and a very important component of the story of India, we can say, is Srila Prabhupada. And this has been, at least in some ways, recognized. The Indian government some years ago issued, this was 1997, issued a postage stamp with Srila Prabhupada. I think the devotees arranged that. They promoted with the government so that this would happen. This is a letter to Gandhi by Srila Prabhupada, and I want to read this because it's quite prophetic. Prophetic means kind of telling what the future will be. Prabhupada wrote to Gandhi in July 1947. Please accept my respectful namaskar. I am your unknown friend. But I had to write to you at times, and again, although you never cared to reply them. This is not the first letter from Gandhi. He never got a reply. Of course, Gandhi was getting probably thousands of letters. The collected works of Gandhi in written, printed form come to 90, I think it's 98 very thick volumes, and very much of it is his correspondence. So he was very busy. I tell you as a sincere friend that you must immediately retire from active politics if you do not desire to die an inglorious death. You wanted chiefly Hindu-Muslim unity in India, and they have tactfully managed to undo your work by creation of the Pakistan and India separation, or separately. You wanted freedom for India, but they have given permanent dependence of India. Whoops. You wanted to do something for the upliftment of the position of the bungis, means the sweepers, the so-called outcasts. But they are still rotting as bungis, even though you are living in the bungi colony. They are all therefore illusions. And when these things will be presented to you as they are, you must consider them as God sent. God has favored you by dissipating the illusion you were hovering in. And by the same illusion you were nursing those ideas as truth. Gandhi wrote what he called his autobiography. It actually deals with rather limited portion of his life, and he called his, as a subtitle, The Story of My Experiments with Truth. Later, Srila Prabhupada would criticize this. He would say, what is the idea of experimenting with truth? Truth is there. No need to experiment. So he seems to be alluding to this. What is he saying? He's saying, Gandhi, you're so famous, but you're actually a failure. What you wanted to do, it's not happening. And so he advises him, you should give all of this politics up, and you should simply preach Bhagavad Gita. Well, as it happens, this letter was July 12, 1949. In January 1948, so just a few months later, Gandhi was assassinated. At point blank range, he was shot. Not by a Muslim, but by a Hindu, and it was a Hindu so-called Brahmin. And he explained later in court his reason for doing it, because he said that this Gandhi was spoiling Hinduism. Gandhi didn't really care about Hinduism. He was trying to promote, some coming together of different people and so on. Anyway, so as I said, Prabhupada was prophetic when he says, you should give up active politics if you do not desire to die an inglorious death. Here we have a bit more timeline, some highlights before he goes to the West. 1933, Srila Prabhupada accepted formal Diksha from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur in Allahabad, where he had his business, his pharmacy. He was a householder, he was doing his business, and this means it was 11 years after he had met Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur for the first time. In 1944, so another 11 years, he starts his magazine, Back to Godhead, in February 1944. 1964. We have with us a sample, not from that far back. Yeah, well, this is number 3 from, say, the reincarnation of Back to Godhead magazine after Srila Prabhupada came to the West, came to New York. And Abhinand Prabhu has a wonderful collection of memorabilia from Srila Prabhupada. So this was 15 cents. So less than 1/5 of $1. And this is volume 1, number 3. And in this issue, Allen Ginsberg, Reflections on the Mantra. Allen Ginsberg was a very popular poet, American beat poet. 1951, Srila Prabhupada takes the Vanaprastha order in that sense that he permanently separates from his family. He moves to Vrindavan. He lives in Vrindavan and sometimes in Delhi for some time. In 1953 in Jhansi, just south of Vrindavan. And there in Jhansi, where he tries to start up an institute, which he calls the League of Devotees, he initiates his first disciple, Acharya Prabhakar. Well, I got a little ahead of myself. It's 1956 when he really moves to Vrindavan after the Jhansi project kind of collapses for peripheral reasons, no fault of Srila Prabhupada. And then in 1959, Srila Prabhupada accepts sannyas. This event takes place in Mathura at the Gaudiya Mat, which is in the charge of his godbrother, His Holiness V.P. Keshav Maharaj.
Bhakti Prabhala.
Bhakti Prabhala. Yes, that's it. Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj. Yeah. 1962, Prabhupada publishes the first volume, Canto 1 of Srimad Bhagavatam. His first canto he'll publish in 3 volumes, and it'll be those 3 volumes that Srila Prabhupada takes to the West. 1964 is volume 2, completed 1965 is when Prabhupada goes to Calcutta after he's made arrangement with Sumati Morarji, the owner of the shipping company, which gives him passage to New York. So his first trip out of India will lead to New York. And then Srila Prabhupada arrives in New York. So-called Big Apple. The big rotten apple. And there we can say, indeed, Prabhupada delivers matchless gifts. Prophetically, the name of the shop that's on 26, the number 26, 2nd Avenue. Manhattan, which is the central part of New York, Manhattan is an island, is largely organized. The streets are very much in a grid pattern, and the north-south running streets are avenues, and the east-west streets are streets. And so you have First Avenue, Second Avenue, Third Avenue, Fourth Avenue, Fifth Avenue, Sixth. It just goes like that. And then First Street, Second Street, and it goes all the way up to the park, 72nd Street. I don't remember how high up it goes. But Srila Prabhupada was very much on the south end in this area of New York, which is rather run down. It's had something of a revival in recent years. It's become not the most high-end place, but it's still very expensive property there. And when Srila Prabhupada was in Matchless Gifts, it's a building which has a few shops, and Matchless Gifts is on the very far end, the right end of this building. And then immediately after this was a petrol station. So it sort of opened out to this petrol station. The last time I was in New York, a year and a half ago, I was quite shocked to see that the petrol station is gone, and the area where the petrol station was is completely fenced around, just like you had this apartment building area fenced around for building. And a big sign showing a picture of a high-rise construction going up, which by now is probably mostly finished, I don't know. And it's such an odd thing to see. There's Matchless Gifts is dwarfed, you know, by this huge building that's going up immediately next to it. But the humble beginnings of the Krishna consciousness movement, it just sort of highlights even more what humble beginnings the Krishna consciousness movement had in New York. And again, the prophetic name Matchless Gifts, because previously someone had a gift shop there and called it Matchless Gifts. And well, actually, yes. What is a more matchless gift than Krishna consciousness? And so very much from here, although we heard before it, initially on the Bowery and now on the Lower East Side, gradually Prabhupada starts getting some people interested in what he's doing, taking it more seriously, some starting to chant and follow Srila Prabhupada. This picture of Panchatattva, I believe, it must have been painted by Jadurani Mataji, aka Shamarani. And this was commissioned by Srila Prabhupada. And this picture was in the front window of the preaching center, 26 2nd Avenue. And I believe that this original, I'm not 100% sure it's the original, but I think it is now in Radhadesh. Yeah? You're confirming. Yeah, it's just hanging in the entryway. The East Village Other is the name of a newspaper, a hippie newspaper, you could say, but nonetheless a newspaper. And here we see an article with what would become a quite famous photograph of Srila Prabhupada standing. The picture on the left, he's standing in front of this, I guess, oak tree in Tompkins Square Park. And he's just giving a short speech about what is this Krishna consciousness and what is this chanting. And the people are standing around, they're curious. What is this? Who is this? What's going on? So this is, and the mood, again, the mood at that time, as we heard from Kadamba Swami, it was very intense, and there was a kind of explosive excitement in the air. We'll get to some more of that in a moment. And so here it says, "Save Earth now." So they identified Srila Prabhupada as, a preacher for save Earth now. Perhaps also prophetic for the environmental. In the US in particular, there was a very intense political atmosphere. At this time, America was deeply involved in Vietnam, of all places, on the other side of the planet. The propaganda was, we have to hold back communism. Communism is the big danger of the world, and it must be stopped. And if we don't stop it in Vietnam, it's going to go from there to Indonesia, and from there to Australia, and before you know it, they'll be on our doorstep. And so the US government was running this war, and the protests against the war was building momentum in America. As I was going to university, my own university, were some of the most vocal activists against the war. And there would be large rallies of students, and sometimes marches, and sometimes confrontations, as we see in this image. Sometimes they would even call out what's called the National Guard. These are kind of like army for within the country. And sometimes the army would throw tear gas at us, at the students. Tear gas is horrible, horrible stuff. It gets to your eyes and your throat. So it was a very intense atmosphere. And Srila Prabhupada came into this middle of this atmosphere, and he said something very shocking. He said, war, it is the duty of Kshatriyas to fight. And he was speaking Bhagavad Gita, he's speaking about Arjuna. Arjuna is a Kshatriya, he should fight. And so Prabhupada was kind of completely ignoring the spirit among the young people at that time, for whom, anything to do with war, it was all about peace and so on. We should give up war. We should be pacifists and so on. Prabhupada said no. And what else was going on in American culture at the time? Just 2 or 3 examples of some films that came out at the time. One of them, a comedy, was called "The Russians Are Coming." That was very much in the mind, the Russians are dangerous. And on the other side, there was a grand film called The Bible. This is sort of very, how to say, I'm a little tired, I don't have my words with me. Anyway, it was a very mixed sort of culture. At this time also, other, we may want to say, spiritual leaders were coming to America. There was T.D. Suzuki, who was a kind of ambassador for Zen Buddhism. He brought Zen Buddhism to America. Everyone gives credit to Suzuki for that. And then it was popularized by this writer, the speaker, Alan Watts. Around the same time, or actually later, there was introduction of Hindu meditation, especially by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was very popular, and he became even more popular when the Beatles also went and spent time with him in India. And then there was introduction of Tantra, or quasi-Tantra, by the likes of Rajneesh, a very, how to say, colorful character, who started a community in Oregon while his followers collected Rolls Royces for him, such that he could drive or ride in a different Rolls Royce every day. They tried to take over the political control of the area of Oregon by some rather strange means. There's a whole history of that. And then asana yoga, which of course now is just totally mainstream, it's everywhere, but BKS Iyengar in particular in America, he was bringing this to everyone's attention. So all these, you can say, competing ideas and practices were there. And especially these things were of interest in the places on the East Coast of America and the West Coast. In particular, New York, Boston, Washington perhaps. And then on the West Coast, especially San Francisco, and just across the bay from San Francisco is Berkeley, which is where the university is, where I was studying. Well, again, Prabhupada settled for some time in the Lower East Side, this really unlikely place. Unlikely in the sense that it would not have been the first choice of any of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers if they would dare to come to America. One of Prabhupada's godbrothers did go to England and then to Germany, Bhakti Hridaya Bon Maharaj, for some time, and he established a small center in London, which, as I understand, is still there. But Prabhupada came to this unlikely place, Lower East Side of Manhattan. And yes, as we've seen, he proceeded. This is not Tompkins Square Park, this is Washington Square Park, the other place that Prabhupada and the devotees would go to chant in those early days. Yeah, it's a special characteristic, we can say, of Prabhupada, that he brought not just himself, not just a style of yoga, for example, or something of that nature, but rather he brought with him an entire culture. And to do this, we can say he was translating culture at the same time. He was, of course, translating from Sanskrit, from Bengali into English language, but he was also translating by his ways of presentation. He was explaining in ways for Westerners to understand. He would give analogies, he would share stories. in the very early days in New York, there's one recording where he's speaking to some people, and at this time, he has no paintings, no pictures of Krishna to show anyone. And he's talking about Krishna, and he's saying how beautiful Krishna is, and he's trying to get his audience to understand, the wonder of Krishna's form. And he says in this one lecture, at one point he asks his audience, "Have you seen a picture of Krishna?" And you can't see them, it's an audio recording, but you can sort of imagine the blank faces, sort of. So yeah, Prabhupada inspired what nowadays we call a lifestyle. That term, I'm not sure I'm happy with, because it suggests fashion, like you dress a certain way today and tomorrow another way, and maybe you're changing fashion at every season, or at least once a year. People, of course, many people take on lifestyles that way. They change their style every now and then. Oh, I've changed my lifestyle now. But Prabhupada introduced, we could say the original lifestyle. How's that? Which is more than a style, and that is. To summarize, Prabhupada would use this expression, simple living and high thinking. And as I've said, I believe this was either Gandhi's or Vivekananda's phrase. Well, as I said, I've presented this for one course introducing Prabhupada, and I wanted to show that Prabhupada's legacy is there, that there are now ashramas, which in English would be called a hermitage. The first of these was New Vrindavan in what is called West Virginia in America. And what you see on the top left is a picture of Prabhupada at New Vrindavan. And on the right, on the top, is Itanagari, and also on the right bottom, Itanagari, which, as I understand, as I've heard, has been developing very nicely. It's become established now in such a way that they have a system now for distributing the milk of the cows to regular customers in the New York and Washington areas. And they've also received considerable support from the government to expand their cow protection program, which is quite interesting to get from the government. They've gotten at least $200,000 or $300,000 for that. Well, then I make some comparisons, some contrasts of Gandhi and Prabhupada. Unlike Gandhi, Prabhupada considered world peace to be possible by propagation of Krishna's teachings in Bhagavad Gita. Unlike Gandhi, Prabhupada did not agree with his interpretation of the Gita as symbolic, or as teaching essentially non-violence. Unlike Gandhi, Prabhupada insisted on rejecting all bodily identification, whether by gender, by nationality, race, or religion, as temporary and mundane. Unlike Gandhi, Prabhupada did not approve of his fasting. Gandhi used to fast for political reasons. people would feel bad, oh, Gandhiji is fasting, we should stop killing each other, something like that. And Gandhi said, Prabhupada said, this kind of fasting, this kind of austerity, Bhagavad Gita says, is in the mode of passion. It's rajaguna, which means the result is temporary. It's not permanent. Unlike Gandhi, Prabhupada established devotional processions worldwide rather than political processions. Gandhi was famous for his salt march, in which he gathered several hundred people and they marched to the ocean in order to collect salt. And this was a political protest, again, against the British because of the salt tax. He said, we'll get our own salt, thank you very much. And so they did like that. It was a political march. Prabhupada, on the other hand, established Ratayatra, Jagannath Ratayatra ki jai. Okay, time is passing. I think we'll come to an end. Literary legacies, as I mentioned, 98 or 98 volumes, 99 volumes of collected works of Gandhi, which it's all downloadable from the internet. Prabhupada wrote some 60 volumes, which, as we all know, mainly translations from Sanskrit and Bengali. His 17-volume Chaitanya Charitamrita from Bengali was quite significant because of bringing what was otherwise really not known. Krishna was, some idea of Krishna was there in the West, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, nothing, not known at all. And first?
Well, they brought this to the psychiater in the, when Kate was in the...
Yeah, it was a document because one devotee was in the psychiatric ward in New York, and to sort of document that, you know, this person is not, he's not mad, he's just a devotee. And anyway, who is actually crazy? So this was produced in mimeograph, and you can see it was done with little staples, and it says here 25 cents. It first says 35 cents, and that's crossed out, and then it's 25 cents. It's issued by the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, 26 2nd Avenue, in parentheses, between 1st and 2nd Streets, New York, New York, phone 674-7428.
Just the last sentence. Interesting.
I'll start from here. Okay, so I should read the last couple of lines from this. If you want peace, if you want happiness, if you want perfection in your life, then just begin to dovetail your desires, activities, and potentials with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then you will see what real happiness is and can tell who is really crazy. That was advice to psychiatrists. Okay, here we have this is the record which was requested by this man who was working for Macmillan. He had contacted the temple and had made an order. He had, I don't know, somehow heard about this LP record. Now this technology is kind of, you don't see it anymore, but this was standard. If you wanted to hear audio recordings, you had to have one of these, and you had to have a device which, like this, and yeah, that's how it works. So when Brahmananda got that order from Prabhupada, find a printer, and then came this request from this man at Macmillan, Brahmananda was having some anticipation, maybe this is a lead, but then when he came there, he saw he's just a lowly accountant. He has nothing to do with decision making of publishing. And at that moment, as he was sitting with this man, with this accountant, the chief editor walked into that office. Just happened to walk in. Macmillan, this is a big publisher. The chief editor walked in. And Brahmananda said, "We have a Bhagavad Gita." And the chief editor said, "Really? I'm looking for a Bhagavad Gita." And it all, was started because one man wanted this album. So there it is. And on the back, this is the album in which Srila Prabhupada sings the Maha Mantra, and then he gives this very, very wonderful little speech explaining the Maha Mantra, which was from Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur. This is the Happening Records Incorporated. Happening.
You just used to listen to George Harrison after.
Yeah.
George Harrison
used to listen. Oh, it says George Harrison used to listen to this. So. And then this was the big hit, which became, which year was it? 1969?
Yeah.
Something like that. This was the Hare Krishna mantra on a 45 RPM record. This was the size of a record you'd get for what's called a single. So it would be a single song on one side and one other song on the other side. This became in England what's called Top of the Pops. Everyone was hearing the Hare Krishna mantra. This was going on. But this edition is Yugo Tong. Yugo Tong. Yeah. Can you explain how this happened?
Okay. Pravi, okay, I will speak in English so that anyway there is translation. So, this record, the internet. Hello? Okay. So this record became #1 also in Yugoslavia because it was printed in Yugoslavian by Jugoton, and many of our parents, they were also listening this. Maybe some, you can ask them, huh?
That's why.
Yeah, that's why so many devotees here. The point is that devotees they were writing letters to George Harrison so that he should come to Yugoslavia and to establish temple here. Because he written Radha Krishna temple. And after that, Prabhupada also got informed about this, that there are people in Yugoslavia who are very much interested into Krishna consciousness. So he wrote a letter which you can find in the database about Yugoslavia, and he said that yes, this is communistic country, so that means they're very fallen, and especially need a lot of help. It's exactly like this, and so he instructs some of his devotees to go and preach in Yugoslavia. And that was the first preaching done by devotees in London, Mukunda, Maharaj, Shyam Sundar. Hare Krishna.
Something else we should show.
Well, maybe we should go from the Bhaktisiddhanta big book, which he sent, and this Krishna Kshetra from Nishikanta.
That's not so direct.
I mean, also for other albums, but
We have a collector. Oh, I want to show this. This is also very famous, the Radha Krishna Temple album. Wait, and no, the Goddess of Fortune. Yeah. Okay. So this was an earlier album made, and this is a double album. No, it's not double, it's just with a big folder. And it has, it has lyrics. It has Govinda prayers, transcriptions, transliteration and translations. It has pictures of Lord Chaitanya, everything is there. And then it has at the end the message of Krishna and a little explanation of the mantra. I wanted to show this one because I have a bit of a relationship to this album, which is, it has Yamuna Devi's Govinda prayers on it and others of her singing. But at a certain point, this was 1970, 74, 75, I was in Germany, and the idea came that these records should be mass-produced and distributed widely, especially for fundraising, because the idea came that we want to purchase some substantial property. So I was one of those foot soldiers sent out with this album, and we used to go anywhere and everywhere. I also spent some time in Denmark, and we used to go door to door all over Denmark. I think I visited every single village in Denmark, no matter how small. They used to drive us to a village and drop us off and come back later in the day. So there was nothing to do but to go to everybody. And we would sell these albums. This and an actual double album of Srila Prabhupada's bhajans, which he recorded in Schloss Rettershof in Germany. They made a quite professional recording. Some of the best quality recording of Prabhupada bhajans was done in Germany. And that was done as a double 2 albums. And we used to distribute that. Yeah. Those were the days. Anyway, this was a bit of a trip down memory lane, so to say, but also going all the way back to Srila Prabhupada's lifetime in preparation. One point I think is for us all to take with us is that we can all similarly think of our lives as preparing, whatever our age may be, and some of our ages we're really getting on in age, and so many of you have so much life before you, but we can be thinking, okay, I'm preparing now. What is it that I'm going to do to make a mark for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for Srila Prabhupada, for the Vaishnavas? What can we do? Rather than thinking, okay, I'm sort of doing what I do and it's going to kind of go on this same tilt for the rest of my life, and it's going to all kind of slow down at some point, and then eventually I will fade away. No, that's not the way Srila Prabhupada taught. When everyone was saying to him in Vrindavan, and then Sumati Murarji, they were saying, Swamiji, you're too old, you can't go to America. Forget it. You're an old man. He ignored that. I'm preaching to myself now. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you all so much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Vyasa Puja Mahotsava ki Jai. Anantagoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Shri Pancha Tattva ki Jai. Itai Gaur Premanande.
HH Krishna Kshetra Swami Maharaj ki Jai. Thank you. Sedaj si bomo pogledali še kratek 5-7-minutni film o Srila Prabhupadu. Tako da kar ostanite, kjer ste. We will watch a short movie about Srila Prabhupada. Senapati Bhakti is the title. Just a few seconds to find it.